So let's speak about your NCR interviews experience. I mean, there were a couple of them, right? So if you can just to begin with, I mean, can you just tell a little bit about yourself and what you have done? And then we will move on to speaking about your interview experiences across different schools.
Right. Okay. Uh, so I have about 3 years of work experience in a corporate company, and then I decided to move to entrepreneurship. Uh, Very recently, I felt that I needed an MBA because as an entrepreneur, I felt that a lot of business concepts, running the company end to end, I wasn't able to understand, or I was feeling that I lacked skills in, making confident decisions in terms of what our strategy should be to expand our company. So that's one of the main reasons why I decided that I should probably go for an MBA.
Perfect. So, can you also tell our audiences about your GMAT score? And since you have had a very successful application season, so you applied to around 5 schools and you got selected to almost all of them, at least in the interview stage, and you have had 2 converts so far.
Yeah.
Your GMAT score, if I remember correctly, it's 720, right?
Correct. So frankly, I wasn't 100% sure about my GMAT score, whether it's good enough for the schools. But then I realized that GMAT score is definitely one factor, but more importantly, they look at you as like what kind of experience you bring to the cohort, and if you can highlight that very well in the essays, then the GMAT score is not going to be a very important factor in your application.
Got it. So let's speak a little bit about your entire application strategy, because given the fact that you have had such a successful admission season, I'm sure that people who are listening to you, they would get a lot of their questions answered just by listening to your story. So can you tell us 2 or 3 things that worked really well for you in the applications process, and what advice would you have for future applicants?
I think, of course, I mean, the most important thing is that you should have enough time to apply to the school. So it's important to kind of plan in advance and know which schools you want to apply to. And I think, secondly, obviously the essays are very important, and it's always good to have some guidance. I took help from you yourself, for yourself to help me with the essays, and that was really helpful because as an applicant, this is your first time you're applying to schools, and you're sometimes not sure of how you should put across what you want to say. So it's good to have someone to guide you and tell you whether whatever you want to say is coming out well, and what points you should highlight, what incidents you should highlight from your life in your essays. And then thirdly is just do a lot of research on the schools, because most schools prefer very specific information about how that school will help you in your future post MBA goals. So unless and until you highlight the specific attributes of the school which are directly relevant to your post MBA goals, they find they probably don't relate to you as well if you don't mention those specific details. So I mentioned very specific clubs or activities that I want to take up in every school in my essays. And I think that was a very important point.
Got it. So I just want to briefly touch upon the fact that you come from a corporate plus entrepreneurship background, and as an entrepreneurial candidate or entrepreneurial applicant, people struggle finding recommendations. So what was your situation like? Was it easy for you? And so can you give some insights about finding your recommender strategy, and who did you sort of take your recommendations from, and how was it like?
Right. So for me, I couldn't really find anyone from my current job as an entrepreneur, who could recommend me, because for me it's been only a year since I've entered into entrepreneurship. So I decided that I'll contact my ex-manager who basically managed me in my previous company, in my corporate company, and uh, that kind of helped me. But I've realized that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle finding recommenders because they might not have worked in a corporate environment at all. So in that case, having like a client recommend you, or any other third company which you haven't which basically won't be biased towards recommending you, is a good idea. Like, they should probably have a good idea of how you work, your clients or your suppliers, or even other employees in your company who have worked with you but are not your relatives. So, in terms of recommendations, entrepreneurs definitely find it difficult, but there are a lot of options out there.
Awesome. So I think this is where we can move on to speaking a little bit about your interview experiences at different business schools. And given the fact that you have interviewed with several top tier business schools, it would be useful for our viewers to sort of get insights from you here. So let's speak about INSEAD Business School. So just to tell the viewers, can you just tell the primary differences between the two interviews that you faced at INSEAD, and who interviewed you?
So the first interview was basically, both the interviews are conducted by alums. One thing which is very different about the INSEAD interview process is that the admissions committee, they share details of your interviewers on mail, who are INSEAD alumni, and then you have to contact them, figure out a common schedule when you can have the interview, and then accordingly, go about it. So for me, one of the interviews was in Mumbai, and one was in my hometown, because they could not find both two alumni in my city. The first interview, I would say, was more stressful than the second one. I think it was more of good cop, bad cop. Like, the first one was a little more grilling, I would say. And the second one was a very conversational kind of interview, where we were just talking about my background. I was talking to the interviewer and, asked asked her about why she chose INSEAD, and how it's been like, what it's been like after she passed out of INSEAD.
Got it. So let's delve a little bit deeper about your first interview at INSEAD, which was the bad cop interview, just to quote you. So can you speak a little bit about the flow of that interview, and was the interviewer trying to stress test you?
I think yes, little bit. He was probably trying to stress test me. So it started off very normally about myself. So I gave a little bit background about myself, and then a lot of times he did cross question me before I could complete what I was trying to say. But then the thing is that if you were not getting affected by it, then it's very easy to kind of justify whatever is being whatever the interview is cross questioning you regarding. And a lot of stress was given on how my age is a little lower than the average age at INSEAD. Because right now, at the time of interview, I was about 25.5 years old, and at INSEAD the average age is greater than 27.
So I would just like to stop you there and sort of do a little bit of myth busting associated with INSEAD. So just for our viewers, there are three different points that I observe about you that most of the other INSEAD applicants do not have. And they assume that you need a literally perfect profile to get into INSEAD, but in your case, you were extremely young. You were like 4 years younger than the average age. And number two, you came from an entrepreneurial background. That was the positioning in your application. And a lot of people say that you need to have worked abroad to get into INSEAD, etc. And number three, you were not from an IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, or did not have a 750 plus GMAT score. right?
Yeah.
So awesome. I mean, despite this, you were able to get into at such a young age. So that's a wonderful achievement. So yes, please continue. You were talking about the flow of the interview.
Yeah, so I think a lot of concentration was given on, how will I fit? He asked me how will I fit in or what will I contribute to the MBA class if I'm so young compared to all my other batchmates, because they'll have much more work experience. So then, I told my interviewer that, for me, like for any business school, I think the quality of work ex is what matters and not only the quantity. And then I highlighted how, even though I'm young, in my corporate work experience as well, the kind of responsibilities that I took up was, quite significant. And because of the kind of responsibilities I've taken up in the past, I will be able to contribute significantly to the, MBA class at INSEAD.
Okay, and any other questions that you remember from your interview that were asked to you?
So since I'm an entrepreneur, there were a lot of very specific questions about, my company, like the business model. A lot of detail was being asked on the pricing strategy of our company, then the challenges faced by my company, and also what is the USP of our company. Then one of the questions which was asked was, what is my plan 10 years from now? Uh, Here, again, here also, the interviewer did try to cross question me on my 10-year plan. So, like, I would like to tell all the applicants that when you're going to the interview, you need to have a really, really well prepared answer for your long-term plan, because most interviewers will grill you on your short-term and long-term goals, and unless you have a very firm reason that you can justify during the interview, there is a high probability that you'll get grilled on this question.
So, thus far we have spoken about the fact that the interviewer grilled you on your fit, given the fact that you were extremely young. And second aspect was goals, that he grilled you about your future aspirations. So, any experience-based questions that were asked? I mean, talk about your leadership and talk about a failure kind of questions.
In interview, not so much. That was more in the second interview. In this interview, it was more about understanding the business model and then cross-questioning on some of the strategies that I was talking about, and more specifically cross-questioning me on my profile and things like that, how I've contributed in the team. But I think the second interview in INSEAD was had a lot of questions about experiences that I've had in the past.
Got it. And were there any questions on why you want to come to INSEAD?
Yeah. So right. So this question, and so there are two questions which I was asked in every interview. One was why you want to come to our B school, in this case INSEAD, and the second one was which other schools have you applied to. That's an important question for the B school, just to get a sense of what kind of schools you've applied to, and where does say INSEAD stand among them. And a follow-up question is obviously whether INSEAD is your first choice or not. So this is again another question which everyone has to prepare for before an interview, because every school has something unique which may or may not be relevant to you. So since you've applied to the school, you need to have at least 2-3 pointers about the school which is unique to that school and which will help you in your post-MBA goals.
Got it. So again, just sticking to the first interview at INSEAD where you were grilled. I remember speaking with you after your interview, and you were kind of disappointed with your performance, that you didn't do well, etc., etc. So I know that INSEAD frequently does this bad cop, good cop routine. So though we have covered about when what kind of questions were asked, but in your opinion, any kind of unexpected questions that you faced in your first INSEAD interview?
Uh, I mean, nothing as unexpected. Most of them were normal questions. Just that a lot of times when you're trying to justify an answer, the probably the cross questioning is a little surprising. Because, for example, when I mentioned about my 10-year plan, my interviewer cross questioned me and said that that cannot be your 10-year plan. I mean, you being in a certain position cannot be the 10-year plan. It should be more than that. So that then you get taken aback because you don't expect such things to be asked out of the blue. But then, I mean, as long as you're thinking straight, I think such questions should not be a very big problem. And more than anything, when they're asking you such questions, it's just to test whether you get tensed or not. And if you don't, more than the content of your answer, it's about how you answer it. Because if you're still confident, I think they're good to go.
So I think that kind of covers all the questions that I wanted to ask about interview 1 at INSEAD. So let's move on to speaking about interview 2 at INSEAD. And here you spoke earlier that it was quite friendly and very conversational in nature. So can you be a little bit elaborate about that, and how did the conversation flow?
So again, it started with me talking about my background and my the work ethics that I have. So once I started talking about, I actually started talking from my schooling days. And since my second interviewer was from my hometown, she could relate to a lot of the things which I was mentioning relating to my school. And we went into a lot of details about my schooling and my college and about my experiences. Since I have stayed in several cities all over India, she was quite inquisitive about how I went out of my city at such a young age. So a good 10 to 12 minutes was about, my school and college. And then, it was a very normal conversation. There were not too many specific questions. It was, then she asked me about, how it's been to shift from a corporate setup to entrepreneurship. What kind of challenges am I facing as an entrepreneur? She even asked me that as an entrepreneur, how easy do you find to hire people? Because she was facing something similar in her company. She herself is an entrepreneur. So it was, more of just talking about common topics. And I think she also asked me a couple of experience-based questions. One was, about any failure that I've had in the past, and another one was on my biggest achievement. Then we went into the specific details about about my answers, and I tried to follow the STAR framework while I was answering these experience-based questions. Where first I defined the situation and then the task at hand, and then I detailed on the action that I took, and then finally what results were obtained. And my second interviewer did ask me, she specifically asked me what electives do you want to take at INSEAD. So that was a very specific question, which thankfully, I had read about it and I had thought about it in advance, so I could answer. But if such questions are not prepared for in advance, it's very difficult to answer on the spot, and then the interviewer will definitely doubt whether you're as you have that much affinity towards the school or not. So
perfect. So that brings me to my next point, that how did you prepare for your interviews? And by the way, I would just like to tell the audiences that you have already received an admit from INSEAD. So congratulations, by the way, on that.
Thanks a lot. Actually, the preparation of the interview, one, I definitely, called Akshat and, took tips from him. He himself is from INSEAD, and he told me a lot of things that I need to read up about. He told me that I need to go through the website and then out and know about everything that INSEAD has mentioned on the website and on other links. Apart from that, I also contacted one of my seniors from my undergraduate college who is an INSEAD alumni. And I also, understood how her experience was. So, to cut the long story short, it's more about just reading up online and, understanding more about the school. The more you know about the school, the better you will be equipped to answer tough questions which will be specific about the school. And the experience-based questions, for me, I just listed down a list of experiences which were important to me. And more often than not, you can relate any question to a list of say 15 to 20 experiences that are important to you, and you can talk about them in the interview. And the rest of the questions are mainly fact based. It's about what your background is and what you've done in the past, or what you did in the project. So yeah.
Perfect. So I'm just curious that did you have a strategy going into INSEAD's interview? I mean, did you think that okay, I'm going to position my profile in XYZ manner, or did you just go in blind? Right. So what was it like for you?
So I think the strategy was already there during the essays. There wasn't much I could change before the interview. So I wouldn't say that I really had a strategy before the interview. I just tried to, prepare myself very thoroughly before the interview, read up a lot of questions online in all these forums, and just made sure that, I had a clear mind on the day of the interview. So I didn't really have a strategy because most of the strategy was done during the essay writing.
Perfect. So I think this is where we can conclude our discussion on INSEAD and move on to London Business School and your experiences of interviewing there.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good.